and IUCN Commission on Ecosystem Management South Asia Regional Chapter. And the idea is basically to celebrate Mountain Day. And as you all know, the International Mountain Day was on 11th of December. But this time was chosen because of the larger availability of all the people from different parts of the world. And so we, as you all know, that this year's Mountain Day is to be celebrated on mountain biodiversity, and a very important topic for South Asia. We have diverse mountains, and we also have these mountains as one of the biodiversity hotspots for the region. So that makes them even more important. I am Dr. Shalini Dhyani, and I am representing IUCN Commissions on Ecosystems Management as South Asia Chair. And with me is the moderator for this first session. With me is Dr. Rajiv, who is Forest Specialist Group Chair, Co-Chair, and also is Assistant Professor with BITS Goa campus. He is a forest expert, and I should say a climate expert as well, who has worked extensively for different states and different parts of ecosystems of India. So with this, I would not waste a lot of time because we have esteemed guest and expert in our panel. And I would like to just give you a little bit brief on what we are expecting. I have already written a detailed email on our expectations are to understand more on mountain ecosystems in South Asia with reference to the status, the threats, and what are kind of data gaps we are having, because it is high time that we start thinking about ecosystem health assessment for South Asian mountains with a special focus on Himalayas and Hindu Kush Himalayas total. And that's why we have different experts joining us here from South Asia, right from Nepal to Bangladesh, and also from different parts, mountain regions of India as well. If you click on your chat box, you'll find a Jamboard. So I'll request all the panelists to please do look to the Jamboard, where while other speakers are talking and discussing the issues, you can always go back there and put up some key points that you think might not be able to cover up while you're speaking for a very small time. And I apologize, the time allocated is very small because the idea was to get the larger perspectives from diverse groups and diverse stakeholder groups who are here with us. And along with the Jamboard, there will be a poll in the end where the priority areas that will be discussed during this webinar will be shared in the end as a poll. And to understand what are the key priority areas, like 3 or 4 areas that we can look forward to and discuss in future for actually undergoing for a ecosystem health assessment for Indian Himalayan region or Hindu Kush Himalayas at large. Timekeeping is very much a request to all of the speakers. So I'll request, please stick to your times. And this is a humble request. I would request our Deputy Chair and Deputy Chair, IUCN Commission on Ecosystems Management, Dr. Madhav, to please be the timekeeper for the sessions. And this is all from my end. I will now request Rajiv to please start with the proceedings and invite our first esteemed speaker for this first session. Over to Rajiv.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shalini. And I'm very happy to invite Dr. Madhav Karki as our first esteemed speaker. And let me give a brief bio of Dr. Karki. So he is the Executive Director and founder of the Center for Green Economy Development in Nepal. He's also expert member of the government of Nepal's Environment Protection Council. He's also MEP, like member of multidisciplinary expert panel of IBIS and Deputy Global Chair of IUCN Commission on Ecosystem Management. And he is co-chair of the Regional Assessment of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services in Asia Pacific region of IBIS in the report that has been published in year 2019. And currently, also he co-chairs the Indigenous and Local Knowledge Task Force of IBIS. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Madhav Karki, sir.
So thank you, Rajiv. Thank you for the elaborate introduction. So distinguished chief guest, Dr. Saxena, distinguished speakers, panelists, colleagues, and friends. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. First of all, it gives me a great pleasure in welcoming you all to this collaborative event to celebrate IMD 2020 in order to highlight the increasing challenges and immense opportunities the South Asian mountains present. IUCN-CEM's South Asia Network, with support from thematic group on Red List of Ecosystem and Forest Specialist Group, join hands with Mountain Partnership based at FAO headquarters to organize this webinar, which Salini has already introduced. I particularly extend my warm welcome to my colleagues. Let me see if this. 1 minute. I'm using two, so I particularly extend my warm welcome to my colleagues from the Mountain Partnership, RLE and IUCN. The theme for this year's Mountain Day, as all of you know, is mountain biodiversity, which is highly relevant to South Asia's globally famous mountain landscapes. Biodiversity and nature's contribution to people underpin almost every aspect of human development, more so of sustainable mountain development in South Asia. They are, in fact, critical resources to the success of the UN Sustainable Development Goals in mountain countries. Healthy biodiversity and ecosystem help countries and people to produce food, water, energy, medicine, regulate climate, and protect us from disaster. The South Asian mountains, especially Himalayas and Western Ghats, are unique. They not only contain 2 of the 34 global biodiversity hotspots, but also have rich and diverse nature, knowledge, and culture associated with them. There is evidence that linguistic and cultural diversity flourishes with biological diversity. The lofty mountain peaks and thriving valleys bring attention to multitude of possibilities of both challenges and opportunities. Isimot says that 6 of the 20 most important food crops originate in mountains. More than 85% of the rural communities in the HKS directly depend on biodiversity for their subsistence. The region has over 35,000 species of plants and more than 200 species of animals. It is reported that biodiversity thrives in the mountain despite or because of harsh conditions, elevation, and isolation. However, biodiversity and ecosystem, especially in mountains, are being depleted and degraded faster than at any other points in human history in our region. I was the co-chair of the best assessment on biodiversity ecosystem services in Asia Pacific region that was released in 2018. Some of the highlights of the report, specifically relevant to South Asia, are biodiversity ecosystem services have contributed to rapid economic growth in the region, benefiting millions of people. Economic prosperity, however, has come at a cost to the region's biodiversity. The South Asia's biodiversity loss was only second to Southeast Asia. Mountain landscapes were found to face unprecedented threats from extreme weather events, invasive alien species, agricultural intensification, fast urbanization, glacier melting, and increasing waste and pollution. 22% of all species and 25% of endemic species in the IUCN Red List are either extinct in the wild or critically endangered or vulnerable. Largest number of species at risk are South Asia, 19% of all species and 45% of endemics. Roughly 1 in 3 species of freshwater fish species assessed is threatened due to overexploitation, invasive alien species, disease, and pollution. And in this context, I think the importance of Red List of ecosystem is so important, and that is the highlight of today's webinar. It is reported that over 60% of the grasslands are degraded due to overgrazing, invasion by alien species, or land conversion to agriculture. The ICMOD's High Map report highlighted that the combination of global and regional drivers of change are impacting ecosystems and leading to biodiversity loss in the SKH. But not everything is gloom and doom. We also reported some important biodiversity gain in the region. There have been significant increases in forest and protected area coverage. Forest cover increase was 5%, 7% in South Asia, most of which was in the mountain regions. However, current efforts are insufficient to halt the loss of biodiversity and the decline in the value of nature's contribution to people in the mountains. Unsustainable forest, pasture, inland water, watershed, and river basin management, land conversion, and destructive harvesting threaten mountain biodiversity and ecosystem services. The report emphasizes that climate change and associated extreme events pose great threat to biodiversity. Climate change is impacting species distribution, population size, and the timing of reproduction and migration. There are, however, a wide range of opportunities to reduce the biodiversity loss and reverse in some cases. IPBES global assessment report suggested that transformative change, especially in institutional arrangements, governance, and economic development strategies, can reduce and reverse the biodiversity. I'm referring here to the green economic development approaches. There are solutions if there is a political will and commitment on the part of the global and regional communities. In closing, I hope this year's IMD event will bring regions, researchers, and SMD advocates more closer, and through our latest and consolidated knowledge and strong ground level evidences, inspire and influence South Asian policymakers to better take care of our mountains and ensure well-being of both the current and future generation. It is high time that we reverse the trend of dangerous decline in our mountain biodiversity, because we will only realize the value of unique biodiversity of our rich and diverse mountain after we lose them. Thank you very much. Happy International Mountain Day, and I wish you all good luck with your speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madhav sir, for your insights and providing more details on what is going global, what are the new research and development, and what all needs to be done for Himalayas and other mountains in South Asia. With this, we will move to the next speaker of this session. We have Sarah Manueli from FAO. From FAO, and she's Advocacy and Outreach Officer. And she will provide an overview about the FAO Mountain Partnership events and what has been done. So I invite her. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Shalini. Good morning.
May I request the panelists and attendees to please keep their microphones on mute so that there is no disturbance for the speakers. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Shalini. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Great to see so many familiar faces. As Shalini was saying, my name is Sarah Manueli, and I work at the Mountain Partnership Secretariat, which is based at FAO. So today I'm going to give you a brief overview of what the Mountain Partnership does, and specifically the activities that we've been working on for International Mountain Day. So I'm going to share my presentation. I hope you see it all. First of all, I'd like to talk to you about the Mountain Partnership. Many of you are aware of who we are, and we are actually the only UN voluntary alliance of partners at a global level, of members that are dedicated to improving the life of mountain people and protecting mountain environments around the world. We're currently 412 members. IUCN is a long-standing members. And we have 60 governments, 19 intergovernmental organizations, and around 330 civil society organizations. And we're a true multi-stakeholder alliance, so bringing to the table diverse voices, which I think is really one of our strengths. The Secretariat is hosted at FAO, and it's financially supported by the government of Andorra, Italy, and Switzerland. A lot of our work is arranged around 4 main pillars. We do a lot of work on advocacy. We raise awareness through events and campaigns about sustainable mountain development. The Mountain Partnership and Mountain Partnership members hold events at large UN important fora like the High Level Political Forum, the 3 UN conventions, And every 3 years, we work with members to compile the UN SDG report on sustainable mountain development, which is really a snapshot of what's happening at global level and regional, local level in sustainable mountain development. And with there, we also provide recommendations, and those form the basis for the subsequent resolution that gets approved by country at the UNGA. We also work a lot on capacity development. We have a long-standing course that has been going on for 12 years called the Promo, which is open for mountain practitioners and officers from all over the world, especially developing countries. Every year it's a different theme. This year was climate change, and for the first year due to COVID-19, it was online. And we also hold another course in collaboration with the University of La Sapienza in Rome called GROW, which is about agrobiodiversity. And again, that's open to students and practitioners from developing countries in mountain areas all over the world. We also hold some courses for the Mount Green Cover Index, which has been developed to monitor progress on the SDG indicator 15.4.2. And it's essentially, it's an index that measures the extent and the change of green vegetation in mountains. So we also provide capacity development to countries to be able to monitor that. A lot of our work, and this is where International Mountain Day comes in, is about communications and knowledge sharing. We produce a lot of technical publications on sustainable mountain development, a lot of articles on scientific journal, but also we share a lot of materials from our members, and we contribute activity to their publication. We also try and reach beyond the traditional constituency. So we try and have, we successfully, I think, have a lot of articles in the mainstream press about mountain issues. Within IMD, we often manage to have a lot of editorials and press releases, which all helps to contribute into the visibility, raising awareness of mountain issues. We've just launched on the 11th of December a new study on the vulnerability of mountain people to food insecurity, and I'll tell you a few things about that later. Another element of our work is really bringing members together. So it's brokering activities and introducing them to each other, helping them maybe with proposals or with in-kind support. We do this at the global, at the regional and the local level. One project which is very successful is the Mountain Partnership Products Initiative, where it's a project funded by the Italian Development Corporation. And it really we're working in 8 countries, helping and strengthening the value chain of high-level mountain products and improving livelihoods and economies through boosting their capacity to market and process and sell better their products. Madhav mentioned a few issues. We know that mountains matter for many things. They matter for our life because they provide key ecosystem services and goods. This year, the theme was of International Mountain Day was Mountain Biodiversity. Mountain Biodiversity matters, and it was a chance to reiterate both the essential role that mountain biodiversity plays, both socially, economically, for human life, but also the threats it faces. We know that mountain hosts about 1/2 of the world's biodiversity hotspots. And we also know that many of the world's most important crops, those that are, when we call them important, is those that are really contributing to food security in the world, like barley, for example, and sorghum, originate and were diversified in mountains. And a lot of livestock species, which are important economically for the communities that live on them. We also know that mountain communities' livelihoods are rooted in mountain agriculture. And mountain agriculture is prevalently often a family farming model, inherently green because it doesn't use so many pesticides and machines, and it's small scale. And of course, it's based very much on the conservation of agrobiodiversity. And agrobiodiversity is really a key, the conservation of agrobiodiversity is a key point to promote sustainable food systems in mountains, as well as their capacity to adapt to climate change. But we also know that we are facing pressures. Mountains and mountain biodiversity are under pressure from land use change, climate change, overexploitation, invasive species, pollution, and demographic and economic factors. Mountain communities are also facing a lack of access to infrastructure, basic services, and credits, and they're often marginalized from the large political processes, so a general lack of pro-mountain policies. This means that mountain people are often among the poorest and the hungriest in the world. A new FAO study, which we just released on Friday, estimates that 1 in 2 rural mountain people in developing countries is facing vulnerability to food insecurity. That's a huge number. It's quite staggering if you think about it. So obviously we need to look at this. We need to look at pro-poor policies, but also, again, going back to the agrobiodiversity, to tackle hunger and malnutrition in mountains, we need to radically transform mountain food systems that can ensure food security, sustainability, and conserve the agrobiodiversity. And this is a bit what we do at the Mountain Partnership. It's just to give you an idea of the social media platforms that we use to promote and raise awareness, as I said, also beyond the traditional constituency. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, we also have Twitter. And I invite you all to join the Mountains Matter conversation on social media. And this is where we share information from members, relevant publications, and relevant events and courses. As you mentioned, this year the theme was mountain biodiversity. Just to remind you that the United Nations General Assembly designated 11th of December as International Mountain Day way in 2003, and it's been celebrated ever since. FAO is actually the lead agency, the lead UN agency, which is mandated to coordinate these celebrations, and the Mountain Partnership implements these celebrations through their communications and advocacy activities. We did many things this year. Just to give you a broad overview, we kicked off an event which was very much youth-led, about sparking change through youth in mountain biodiversity. We had speakers from all different sectors around the world. Those who attended or those who didn't can log in to Facebook channel. We had a celebration, a very successful celebration with mountain champions and high-level speakers on Friday. And then we obviously we collate and we're in contact with all our members. We've had, I think 50 is a conservative number. We've had news so far about 80, 90 events around the world, which shows that COVID-19 hasn't dampened the Mountain Partnership families' will to celebrate mountains and really underline the role that they play for all of us. And we publish these on the International Mountain Day website that we manage, as well as in a newsletter that we will send out to everybody in January. We also produce content. So obviously infographics. This year we teamed up with GMBA, Global Mountain Biodiversity Assessment, who are based in Switzerland, and produced for some fact sheets. You're just seeing here a screenshot, but we can go a bit more in detail. In 6 languages, that's what we do. We produce as much as we can in the whole 6 UN languages. We also promote children's activities, really to widen the spectrum, because we believe that youth and children are the future of tomorrow. So we need to raise awareness about mountains and their roles from the very beginning. And we're working also with a big project with UNESCO to ensure that there's mountain modules in schools' children's. International Mountain Day is a great occasion for visibility, and that means that we really try hard to push out news. We published this year, we published a FAO press release. An editorial signed by the Director General was published in China, in Vietnam, in Latin America, in Europe, to really have that kind of wide outreach that we need to make to have an effect, to make changes. And also the Director General recorded a video message for International Mountain Day, which you can see on our website. Social media cards, that's a good, effective way to pull through key messages in an attractive format. Again, we produce them in different languages and we disseminate them to the Mountain Partnership members. And then last but not least, this year we also had a photo contest where we asked participants from children's and youth and adult category to contribute, and we had about 500 submissions, and you can see some of the 3 winners here, and I think we had a fantastic turnout. Mountain Partnership are goodwill ambassadors. That's another tool we use for our advocacy purposes. They usually help us to reach, again, different audiences. So you can see we have a very diverse lot here. We have pianists and composers, mountaineers, spiritual leaders, television hosts, and even representatives for the private sector. And they help us. They help us reach out to donors, to their own community, whereas it's a climbing community or it's a musical community, again, to reinforce the message of why mountains matter. This year, just to conclude, we decided to do something a little bit different, and we worked to appoint a new mountain partnership ambassador, which is Nepalese trail and sky runner Mira Rai, who not only is a formidable athlete who has won many awards, but she's also a real youth advocate and works with our foundation to empower young female runners. And as a child of the mountains, as she herself defines herself, someone who was born in extreme poverty and really rose up to heights, she is really an example for all of us, which we're thankful to employ with us, and about why we must not leave mountains and mountain people behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for a very interesting presentation. I think for me, the key takeaway from your presentation is the fact that 1 in 2 mountain persons is potentially vulnerable to food security. And I think as we go forward, we will try to unravel the dynamics that is there underlying this observation. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. And I would like to take this opportunity now to introduce Dr. Vivek Saxena. He's a very senior Indian Forest Service officer of the Haryana cadre of 1991 batch. And he is the country representative of IUCN India. We all know him, and he has hold some very important strategic positions within government, and he has been doing very significant work on the conservation across different ecosystems in India. And I open the floor for Dr. Saxena to make his observations.
Thank you, Rajiv. And at the outset, first let me congratulate the organizers for organizing this very important discussion on a very important theme on the Mountain Day. Here also in India on 11th of December, we organized one event in partnership with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, and also National Institute of Disaster Management. And the theme of the today's discussion, that the IUCN Red List of the Ecosystem, Typologies, Principle and Classification and Ecosystem Risk, and how to prioritize the conservation in mountain ecosystems of South Asia. And Dr. Karki, in his opening remarks, highlighted the importance of the mountains and the work which is being done by Sarah, the FAO Mountain Partnership. And I'm really very much impressed by the presentation also. And I would also like to inform that even I was part of one IPROMO training program about 3-4 years back, and I really enjoyed this, and it was a very informative program. So most of the things regarding, as we say, that mountains play a very significant role in sustaining the ecosystem services and also sustaining the livelihoods, not only for the people who inhabit the mountain region, but also the people downstream. The linkages of the upstream, downstream linkages and sustaining livelihoods, species conservation, and as we know that the most of the biodiversity that lies in the mountains. So mountains play such a vital role. By conserving the mountain, we not only ensure that mountain biodiversity is conserved, but also the downstream biodiversity conservation, the agro-biodiversity, the food system, they are all depend upon the health of the mountain ecosystem. And that's why this Mountain Day is a very important day, which was initiated by the United Nations in 2003. And we have to focus our renewed commitment on the Mountain Day for the conservation of the mountains. The role they play, they are very rich in endemic plant and in animal species, harbor 1/3 of the global terrestrial biodiversity, and nearly more than half of the global biodiversity hotspots. And especially in mountains, biodiversity is high compared to the other regions. But the mountain biodiversity, the health of the mountain ecosystem also ensure the conservation of the global biodiversity. We know that mountain above have about 15% of the world's population, and our fresh water is our very survival is dependent on the mountains. Most of the rivers, they originate from this mountain, and of the 20 plant species that supply 80% of the world's food, the 6 originated and have been diversified in the mountains. That is the maize, potatoes, barley, sorghum, tomatoes, and apples. And this mountain biodiversity conservation is also a key factor for meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially the Goal 15, though I think this plays a vital role for attaining all other related goals also. But unfortunately, in the pursuit of the development, and the mountains are under threat, one, because of the climate change, and also because of the anthropogenic factors over exploitation. As the global climate continues to warm, mountain people, some of the world's poorest, they face even greater struggles to survive. The rising temperatures also mean that mountain glaciers are melting at unprecedented rates, affecting freshwater supplies downstream for millions of people. And on this mountain day, especially when we are in the present day context, in today's discussion, we are concentrating on the South Asian region, but it applies to all the mountain ranges across the world. So database or data gaps in terms of all the mountain ranges have to be ensured that how to address those data gaps for guiding the future policy interventions and how to conserve the biodiversity and ecosystem services of all the mountain ranges. As far as India is concerned, we have 7 major mountain ranges that have a peaks of over 1,000 meters. So most of the time we concentrate on the Himalayan mountain ranges or Hindu-Kush Himalayan region in the South Asia across the 8 Himalayan countries. But apart from that, we need to give equal importance to all the mountain ranges. And in India, some of these 7 mountain ranges that are certainly the mighty Himalayas, the Karakoram and the Pir Panjal range, the Purvanchal range or the Eastern Mountain range that comprises of the 3 parts. The Satpura and the Vindhya range lies in the central India, and both these ranges, they run parallel to each other. And the Aravalli is the oldest mountain range of India. So they need to their biodiversity, the desert ecology, which is comprising in the Aravalli mountains, that needs to be conserved. Then we have a very rich Western Ghats, 1,600 meter long mountain range that runs from Gujarat to Kanyakumari in South India. This range is also called Sahyadri Mountain. It comprises Nilgiris, Annamalai, and Cardamom. Eastern Ghats mountain range, they run in the eastern part of Indian Peninsula, parallel to the Bay of Bengal. The most famous and highest mountain range, Himalayas, which was recently in the news also because of the increase of the height of Mount Everest by 86 centimeters. Youngest and longest mountain range in India, also largest peak. It bisects India from the rest of India and is the primary source of mighty rivers in India. Supports life support system of millions of people in upland and downstream. Climate regulator for much of the Asia, and it's globally recognized for its sacred, spiritual, and philosophical values. One of the examples of the mountain biodiversity when we are talking today, the caterpillar fungus or cordyceps in Himalayas, overexploitation over the decades have pushed it to the brink of extinction. And here the IUCN has prompted by categorizing it into the vulnerable category, and that also gives triggers a conservation action and also allows the governance authorities, conservationists, and also the policymakers to ensure how to have the conservation to prevent it from the extinction. And these extraction pressures, they are further compounded by the climate change, which is already impact phenology, interspecies interactions, and causing rain shifts, among other changes. So ecosystems are characterized by a network of interactions that we must understand in depth, and especially in the context of the mountain biodiversity, their role becomes more and more important when we have to tackle the challenges of the climate change, but at the same time, the interactions between the ecosystems and the relevance of the mountain ecosystem especially. So for promoting research is key. We need to better understand the ecology of our mountain ecosystem to generate more complete and higher quality of the red list assessment of the ecosystem. IUCN's red list of ecosystems is a key tool on the lines of red listing of the species. It allows addressing different aspects of public policy from a global and national perspective, and it aids countries to achieve international conservation goals. The joint application of the red listing of ecosystems with other IUCN knowledge products, such as nature-based solution standards, which were released this year only by IUCN, these global standards, in the context of the COVID pandemic present scenario, they become more and more relevant and important. Apart from that, other IUCN conservation tools like integrated biodiversity assessment tool and also the OECM guidelines, identification of such OECM areas as per this guideline will be very, very vital for conservation of biodiversity outside the designated protected area. It also provides a unique opportunity for conservation plans. The red listing of ecosystem was officially recognized by IUCN in 2014. Since then, the now global standard for assessing the risk of ecosystem collapse has been tested in more than 50 ecosystems spanning 6 continents and 3 oceans. In India, Indian Sundarbans mangrove forest assessment has been recently completed. So such tools become more and more significant in the times of pandemic, where healthy ecosystems are emerging as our last frontiers of defense, and our forest landscape restoration efforts and other ecosystem restoration efforts need to be guided by these and allied tools for maximum impact. IUCN has been working in Indian Himalayan region since 2007 and has implemented several projects, including one of the projects supported under the National Mission on Himalayan Studies. The project name is Coping with Uncertainties, and for which the GB Institute had supported this project, and we have completed this project recently only. And some of these pilot actions under this project, they need to be upscaled further in appropriate sites as per the needs of those particular sites. So taking further, IUCN is also implementing one Himalayas for Future project, which is supported by the corporate Tatas, under which we are also developing the scenario building. So the modeling that in future, based on the policy intervention and other actions, in what will be the various scenarios, so that accordingly timely action, coordinated action at the policy level, at the planning level, by the government agencies, the corporates, private sectors, civil society organizations need to be planned, so that especially the importance of sensitization of biodiversity conservation to the corporates is very relevant to sustain their business practices or their business products, so that if the biodiversity is lost, so their entire value chain can be under threat. And here lies the role of and importance of our such type of our conservation initiatives for the advocacy and awareness, so that they all come on a common platform in this on this very mountain day, on the very relevant theme of mountain conservation of the mountain biodiversity. So as we observe today, International Mountain Day, it is time we reflect on the consequences of our actions on mountain biodiversity conservation. Mountain environment needs to be well understood, not only as being diverse and fragile, but also requiring different conservation approaches from the plain. These should form the basis of conservation interventions specific to the mountains, including future scenarios and planning for climate change impacts on the fragile mountain habitats and biodiversity. And with these words, I thank once again everyone, and I hope that today's celebration will guide us for the future planning and initiating conservation action, especially in the context of mountain biodiversity conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saxena. Indeed, a lot of information and details that you provided regarding the work that IUCN India office is doing, and also largely on why we need to look beyond Himalayas and Hindu Kush in India and South Asia. So your words are well taken, sir, and especially why we need to look now to scenarios and models to predict areas that need potential conservation and conservation effort to protect these ecosystem with further degradation, and reducing the degradation that has already happened, and try to restore the ecosystem by using more people-based and nature-based solutions. Thank you once again for participating in this event. And now with this, I move to the keynote speaker of this event. And I must not take much time because it is already midnight for her. And I'm really thankful for her to join, that she took time out of her busy schedule and joined this event to provide more insights on red listing of ecosystems for the larger audience that is sitting with us and has joined from different parts of the world. I'll give a very brief introduction, but I'm sure if you Google her name, you'll find many relevant publications that she has done, and highlighting the hibernated reasons behind collapse of ecosystems and so on and so forth. So with us, we have Dr. Chloe Sato. And I'm sorry, Chloe, if I'm not rightly pronunciating your name. With all those apologies. Yeah. So Dr. Chloe has completed her PhD at the end of 2013, and she's right now postdoc fellow with Conservation Science Research Lab at Dickens University, Australia. It's one of the very important laboratories who are working a lot on conservation and red listing of ecosystems. She has her research interest focused on the mechanisms that are driving landscape scale biodiversity patterns in alpine and temperate woodland ecosystems. So she is more or less an expert to guide us for high altitude ecosystems. And her work has been on interface between practical and theoretical surrogate ecology with the ability to predict ecosystem collapse. And currently she is conducting a lot of work on IUCN Red List of Ecosystem Assessment for alpine and subalpine areas in Australia. And I think she has also contributed to the recent assessment of Myanmar, or maybe she has some information that she will be sharing. So without taking much more time, I would invite her. Dr. Chloe, over to you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. So thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to come and talk with you all today. I think I'm on my last slide, so I'm going to reshare that. It's a very good start. So once again, yeah, thank you for inviting me to come and talk about the Red List of Ecosystems. I would like to acknowledge both Professor Emily Nicholson and Professor David Keith, who are collaborators on the project that I'm working on in Australia, but also who have inputted a lot into the development of the Red List of Ecosystems process. So really, the Red List of Ecosystems is a risk-based approach to assessing ecosystems, and it provides a protocol and criteria for assessing the relative risk of ecosystem collapse. What it does in addition to that is it provides us with some understanding of the causes and pathways of change in ecosystems, which is really useful as a basis for designing strategies to avoid and abate risks in ecosystems. And that can be based on severity of threat or the most compromised processes in an ecosystem. The other thing that the Red List of Ecosystems is really good for is thinking about what kinds of changes to ecosystems are large and detrimental as well. So the Red List of Ecosystems really functions at a national or a continental scale rather than subnational and local, although there is some scope to conduct assessments at that scale. But I suppose in the context of climate change, which does affect mountain ecosystems, we do want to think broader than local ecosystems, because climate change works beyond national borders, beyond continental borders in some cases, and beyond ecoregions. So the other reason why we want to think a little bit more broadly about ecosystem risk is because there is a huge opportunity to share information and share data about different ecosystems to link in with the global ecosystem topology, which has just been developed and released, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And this greater synthesis of information can be brought to bear on local ecosystems. So it is a really great opportunity. And in terms of the Red List of ecosystems, there has been quite a good global uptake. So the image at the bottom is actually from 2019. So additional assessments have come on board. And you can see it covers quite a few continents. Vivek took some of my talking points because it does have quite a broad reach. And when you compare that to mountain ecosystems, which is in the top corner, you can see that a lot of mountains have actually fallen into some of the assessments which have already been done. So those assessments provide an opportunity for underpinning new assessments in the Southern Asian mountain ecosystems. So that's sort of just a point that I really wanted to make, is that it doesn't need to be done from scratch. There's a lot of information out there that can be leveraged and used to start doing assessments in different areas. Now, in terms of the actual process, what happens is ecosystems are assigned to ordinal categories of risk from least concern through to collapsed. And that's based on 5 different assessment criteria, 2 of which function around the distribution of the ecosystem, so decline in area, or the fact that the ecosystem is very restricted and at elevated risk of collapse, as well as 2 condition-based criteria, so the degradation of abiotic processes or the disruption to biotic processes that compromise the ability for an ecosystem to support key biota. Now, if sufficient data is available, quantitative risk analysis is also a possibility, which gives us the ability to think about some of the more complex interactions that occur in ecosystems, but it is quite a data-intensive process. And each of these different criteria are assessed against different timescales. So we have a historical timescale, which is 1750 through to present, the recent past, which is the last 50 years, and also looking into the future, so the next 50 years. But before you sort of dive into the assessment process, you need to go through a diagnostic phase, which involves thinking about what is an ecosystem and what is ecosystem collapse. So within your area of interest, you need to have a think about which ecosystem functional types occur in an area, and then describe them based on their key biota, abiotic features, and some of the interactions and processes that underpin those ecosystems. Then the next step is to think about what can go wrong that cause these ecosystems to transform their identity. And this transformation of identity occurs beyond the typical variability observed in ecosystem function. And it can actually manifest in quite a few different ways, depending on the type of ecosystem that you're in. So as a couple of examples, and I've gone very Australian centric, I apologize, but I tried to choose the mountain systems. So in Tasmania, montane forests and rivers in Queenstown were affected by a mining development, and the deforestation that occurred actually happened due to pollution from the ore smelt, and subsequent logging and then erosion due to high rainfall events resulted in the final collapse of that forested ecosystem. Subsequently, some of the copper tailings ran into local river systems around the Queenstown community, and that elevated the toxicity and the turbidity and sedimentation within those river systems, which effectively caused localized collapse. And in the top corner, you can see the difference between one of the rivers affected by the copper tailings and the natural ecosystem. So they're really, really quite different ecosystems. And that's sort of just evidence of collapse occurring. As another example, once again Australian, mountain ash forests are actually characterised by some arboreal fauna. And these particular fauna are dependent on mature trees for their survival. These mature trees in turn support sort of moist microclimates in the understory that also support diverse plants, particularly tree ferns. Now, when fire comes through these landscapes or logging occurs, you get a shift from these mature systems to much younger stands of trees, and they have much smaller diameters, and the understory tends to be dominated by acacias, which are much more fire prone. So not only are you seeing a shift in the biotic composition of the ecosystem, but also in the ecological processes that underpin that particular ecosystem type. And that actually, in both situations, has quite significant consequences for ecosystem service delivery. So young forests, or no forests at all, in some cases, have much lower carbon storage potential. The water provisioning to local communities or cities like Melbourne is greatly reduced. Recreation and tourism also can be reduced, which has subsequent impacts on income and local economies. And finally, timber supply can also be reduced. So the red list of ecosystems, through these diagnostic processes, you can actually link features of ecosystems with ecosystem services, which in turn can inform conservation planning and land management. So this diagnostic process isn't necessarily the easiest thing to go through, but it's a really, really important part of the assessment because it shapes the assessment and it also affects its usefulness. So defining units of assessment and conceptualizing them can actually be helped by using the global ecosystem topology, because this topology provides a consistent ecosystem framework. It's hierarchical in nature and groups together ecosystem functional groups based on traits, common drivers, common threats, and common indicators. And that enables generalizations about ecosystem change, which can in turn be tailored to sort of more national and local ecosystems. The other thing that the global ecosystem topology does is that it facilitates translation across existing topologies. So some national vegetation classification schemes have been crosswalked into the global ecosystem topology. And that means that we can leverage off past investments as well as current usage through a common set of terminology as well as a consistent framework. So what the global ecosystem topology is doing really is establishing a common language for ecosystem management that is really useful in underpinning all red list of ecosystem assessments. Now in Myanmar, which I didn't do the assessment for, but I will provide examples for you, the global ecosystem topology was actually used to guide the development of an ecosystem classification scheme. So many of the ecosystems in Myanmar hadn't previously been sort of mapped or described. And this systematic assessment sort of identified knowledge gaps and allowed them to be filled. So a systematic assessment is basically just a wall-to-wall assessment of all of the ecosystems within a country or within a particular region. And it has benefits in terms of identifying ecosystems most at risk. It's really good at guiding and identifying important areas for protection, like key biodiversity areas or World Heritage areas. It can formulate strategies for and priorities for ecosystem restoration, as well as in general, understanding where knowledge gaps are and where they need to be filled. So what was involved in the Myanmar assessment was a partnership between NGOs, government and researchers, and it required basically 2 years full-time for a scientist and local technical staff. And at the beginning of the assessments, all published and unpublished literature was reviewed, and where data was scarce, that was, I guess, counteracted by conducting a lot of field work as well as specialist remote sensing to complete the maps and the assessments. And what resulted was a whole bunch of new mapping data and the first national ecosystem inventory for Myanmar. And I've highlighted in the red circles the mountain ecosystems that might be particularly useful for mountain assessments in Southern Asia, because obviously sort of just next door to those areas, and the information in those assessments will be really useful in underpinning any new assessments. So in terms of other products which came from the assessments, the descriptive profiles are really, really useful. Like I said, some of these systems, and particularly the mountains, actually had no mapping and no descriptions previously. So this systematic assessment highlighted the need for data collection in those areas, and as well as the importance of the mountain ecosystems just in general. And after that identification of a knowledge gap, systematic data collection went ahead, which allowed these assessments to be completed. And they sort of range from least concern through to critically endangered, largely based on distribution, but some of the criterion C and D, so the abiotic and biotic features have also been assessed. And as you can see, some of the systems are also data deficient. So that just really highlights the need for more information being collected in mountain regions. So of particular interest are probably the conifer forests, the cloud forests, the alpine cliffs and screes, as well as the alpine meadows. So those are some of the assessments that you can find in the Myanmar Red List of Ecosystem document. On top of the assessments, there was also a rigorous scientific publication. So all Red List of Ecosystems need to be peer reviewed. And so that means that everything that's done is underpinned by robust science. And that means that outputs can be more easily adopted by government. And in Myanmar, they were used for some of the CBD reporting, development of protected area network, and identification of key biodiversity areas. But on top of that, the assessments also raised awareness about human dependence, natural capital, and trends in status of ecosystems, particularly in mountain regions in Myanmar. So really, the Red List of Ecosystems have global, national, as well as local value. Now, in Australia, the project that I'm working on is assessing alpine, subalpine ecosystems. It's a combination of a strategic and systematic assessment. So within the alpine, subalpine zone, we're assessing all of the ecosystems in that region, which makes it systematic. It's strategic in the fact that we're going into a great amount of detail and really trying hard to find as much data on the ground as possible to assess against criterion C and D. And that fine scale data is really useful for local management. What it involves at the moment is a partnership between government and researchers. And we've got a governance structure that involves a whole bunch of working groups of specialists that oversee each of the ecosystem assessments. We've had a couple of expert elicitation workshops and done literature reviews to develop to identify the units of assessment as well as describe them. And we've crosswalked a lot of the national vegetation classifications we have in Australia into the ecosystems that we finally decided upon. In terms of spatial data, it's been compiled from government vegetation mapping with expert augmentation so that it better reflects what's going on the ground, threatened species habitat mapping, as well as specific ecosystem maps from researchers. And there are global analogues from Australia, including the alpine meadows, there's alpine shrublands, the peatlands, as well as some of the alpine streams, just to name a few. Our focus is largely on climate change and how that manifests in these systems. So that might be something that's potentially very useful in future if assessments are done in Southern Asia. Now, I just want to walk you through one of the examples of the completed assessments because we haven't done them all at the moment. But what I wanted to highlight in the first instance is that the global topology, so the conceptual diagram at the top of the slide, that's from the global topology. And it actually maps really well to the more localized conceptual diagram that experts derived for the snowpatch ecosystems that I'm going to talk about. So, for example, I mean, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but anyway, shrub and tall grass invasion, for example, in the snow patches in the local assessment maps with competition in the biotic interactions in the global conceptual diagram. There's also marsupial grazing, which links with herbivory. Topography is captured in the local diagram as well as in the global diagram, and extreme cold is captured by snow. So I just really want to emphasize the fact that you don't have to start from scratch. The global topology, a lot of work has been done, and it's a really good jumping point to start developing conceptual diagrams for each of the ecosystems that you're interested in assessing. Now, in terms of the snowpatch, what's actually going on in Australia is these ecosystems are characterized by very low statured herbs, and these herbs persist in areas where snow lies on the ground into the summer months. And we do get snow in Australia. Problem is climate change and elevated ambient temperatures are meaning that that length of snow lie is reducing, and that facilitates invasion by shrubs and tall grasses as well. And these change the microclimate of the snowpatch ecosystems and outcompete those low statured herbs. In addition to that, climate change is actually also facilitating migration of some feral species like horses and deer to high elevation zones where they have never been before. And these particular species trample the quite sensitive snow patches as well as browse on them. So there's a couple of threats facing these particular systems. But once we develop that conceptual model, those key threats and key drivers, we're able to identify indicators that could be used in the assessment under criterion C and criterion D. So for criterion C, which is abiotic, we looked at snow duration and temperature. Temperature was more of a proxy for snow because the snow data was very restricted, and we wanted to be able to extrapolate across the whole extent of the ecosystem, and temperature data was much more readily available in climate projections. And then in terms of criterion D, we used shrub and tall grass invasion, and that came from a lot of research done across quite a few snow patches in Australia. And what we found was under criterion C, we assessed the ecosystem as endangered because snow duration is just significantly declining. And that was based on sort of quite recent historical data, and we extrapolated a little bit into the future. But overall, the snowpatch ecosystems are actually assessed as critically endangered, and that's because they're so incredibly restricted in Australia, and climatic extremes and climate change in general is likely to push them quite close to extinction. So in closing, I just wanted to reiterate that the Red List of Ecosystem can support mountain conservation in quite a few different ways. So completed assessments and the global topology provide really useful guidance for doing assessments. There's also kind of prototypes for how conservation manifests in ecosystems based on some of the research I'm doing at the moment. And like I mentioned earlier in the talk, more and more assessments are being done. So there's a growing body of information and a community of practice that can be drawn upon to complete assessments in future. The other great thing about the Red List of Ecosystems is that it really does highlight the importance of mountain ecosystems like it did in Myanmar, and that can catalyse investment into seeking additional data that will inform conservation management of mountain systems. It will also, I guess, give additional information in terms of understanding risks from climate change as well as other threats, although this information can be synthesized from some of the other mountain assessments which have been completed across the globe. And that greater understanding really informs the way we manage these types of systems. And the way we manage these systems has flow-on effects for improving livelihoods and well-being of not only biodiversity, but communities that depend on the mountains. So if you're interested in learning more about the Red List of Ecosystems, we actually have a freely available online course run through Deakin University, and I've got the link on the slide there, but I'm happy to distribute it after the talks as well. And once again, I'd just like to recognise that Emily Nicholson and David Keith have contributed a great deal to this and continue to. And thank you once again for allowing me the time to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Sato. This is a very interesting presentation. And we have many questions, especially from your Myanmar study. We want to understand a lot of things. However, there's no time for questions at the moment. And we will hold back all of the questions and we'll ask you at the appropriate time. But it's time for me to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Ranveer Rawal. So Dr. Rawal is director of GB Pant, the National Institute of Himalayan Environment. He brings with him decades of work experience on high altitude ecology and conservation biology. He has been leading some of the very relevant programs for conservation of mountain ecosystems across Indian Himalayas and transboundary areas, including he's working with the National Mission on Sustainable Himalayas as well under India's National Action Plan on Climate Change. He has also contributed to the IBIS Asia Pacific Assessment, and he's going to talk here about ecosystems and biodiversity values, threats, and opportunities in the Indian Himalayan region. And I open the floor for Dr. Rawal. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv, and namaste everybody who have joined this panel or as a participants. Let me share the screen. I have prepared a few slides, then I will deliberate on it. Can you see this screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Thank you. So the topic which has been assigned to me is ecosystems and biodiversity values, threats and opportunities in the Indian Himalayan region. I have tried to briefly indicate the biodiversity values, but before that I would like to just say that the Indian Himalayan region, it is massive and it forms a large part of the whole Himalayan system. If you see the 3 dimensions, across 3 dimensions, we are more than 2,500 kilometers in length, then more than 250 kilometers in width, and in height, more than 8,000 meters. So this massiveness brings together the diversity of systems, their complexity and fragility also. If you see the broad ecosystems in the Himalaya, in Indian Himalaya, then we find that broadly Indian Himalaya has been classified into 3 biogeographic zones. They include the Trans-Himalaya, the Himalaya, and Northeast Himalayan region, and 10 biodiversity biogeographical provinces. So these are the broad ecological systems in the Indian Himalayan region, but there are so many subsystems within these biogeographical provinces. And if we just consider the forest system, then ranging from tropical rainforest to the subalpine and alpine and the cold deserts. So this is the diversity, and within this broad framework, again, there are subsystems which are prevailing there. So, the recent indications which have come from the researchers in the Himalayan region, HKS region, then these systems are facing the threat of global warming, and in particular, the Himalaya is experiencing warming more rapidly than the global average. This is a reflection of what the Indian Himalayan region it represents with respect to India. You could see that if we go into the plant groups or animal groups, then we are representing very high. Although the Indian Himalayan region covers only 16% of India, but if you see the biodiversity representation of India, then it is very high. If we just go into the realized values, then we know the goods which are realized by people in the region. Basically, the indigenous communities are very much dependent on the biodiversity components. But I have taken only 3 examples here. If you see the medicinal plants in the Indian Himalayan region, we have documented more than 1,750 such plants. But the more important part of this diversity of medicinal plants is representation of nearly 15% endemics. That means they are confined to the Indian Himalayan region only. So this is the value which can be harnessed, or which can be further benefits can be drawn from this. Similarly, if we take the example of wild edibles, nearly 675 wild edibles have been documented from the region. Again, a high percentage, nearly 18 to 19% of this is endemic to the region. Similarly, the agri-biodiversity, some other colleagues will be speaking on this, but this agri-biodiversity across the region is very unique and very rich. And this has basically, this value has been realized by the people in the region. If we come to the ecosystem services part, then taking an example of forest ecosystems only, then we know that the Indian Himalayan region contribute nearly 1/3 of total India's forest cover. Again, I would say that just being 16% of India, we are having 33% of India's forest cover. But more importantly, again, in the if you see the landscape of Indian Himalayan region, then nearly 35% of Indian Himalayan region is not basically suitable for forests, being located in the high altitude region beyond the tree lines. So only 65% land is available which can be forested, and that is contributing towards 33% of total India's forest cover. And a rough estimate of the values which are basically flow from the Himalayan forest ecosystem. In 2007, one estimate was there for 1,000 billion rupees per annum. This is the cost, or this is the value assigned to the services which flow from Himalayan region. So this is a very huge value or monetary value associated with the Indian Himalayan forests. But more importantly, I wanted to show this table to you. Basically, this is about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. of Indian Himalayan biodiversity. And I would like to mention that if we consider the strength of Indian Himalayan region or Indian Himalayan biodiversity, then I would put that strength into four major components. One, that the biodiversity of Indian Himalayan region is rich and very representative, as I indicated with respect to India. Then much of it is unique and having incomparable value. And the third strength, which is associated with Himalayan biodiversity, is indigenous knowledge system and practices, which are prevailing in the region. And finally, fourth one is the rich or strong conservation area system in the Indian Himalayan region. So I have tried to put these strengths into different subsets and then associated weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I would not read all, but if we take an example of richness and representativeness of Indian Himalayan region, then within this sector, we can say that the strength is forest. It is a forested landscape, which represents 1/3 of India. Alpine ecosystems, 100% of India. This is another important factor which need to be considered. And the biodiversity representation, it is very high of total country or India. So that way, these are the subsets of richness and representativeness, which is, in my opinion, is a strength. But if you see the associated weaknesses, then high dependence of the people on the biodiversity or the forest of the region, poor management of this biodiversity, and missing holistic understanding. This is missing. So this is the major weakness which I associate with this particular part of the Himalayan biodiversity. If we look into the opportunity part, then the Himalayan biodiversity provides an opportunity of being a carbon sink. And this biodiversity can be harnessed in different ways. For example, tourism, associated activities, be it nature-based tourism, be it adventure tourism. Also, harvesting values, particularly with regard to the medicinal plants, wild edible plants, and agri-diversity systems. And sustaining flow of ecosystem services, basically how the ecosystem services would basically flow from Himalayan biodiversity. This is, I consider, these are the opportunities associated. But again, if we look into the threats, then increasing pressure of infrastructure is there, which is threatening Himalayan biodiversity ecosystems. And habitat loss, continuous process of habitat loss is there, be it forested landscape or be it the alpine landscapes. We are losing our natural habitats. Over and unscientific harvesting of the high value plants, be it medicinal plants or wild edibles, and the increasing people's apathy. This is again one major threat to the Indian Himalayan biodiversity or ecosystems. Similarly, if we take a uniqueness or incomparable value as a strength of Himalaya, then we have endemic species, specific habitats like wetlands, timberlines. Among wetlands, the high altitude wetlands, they are very unique to the region, and especially ecosystems like alpine meadows, cold deserts, agro ecosystems. These are the strengths of Indian Himalayan biodiversity. But at the same time, the fragility of ecosystem, as it is well known that Himalaya itself is a very fragile ecosystem, then inadequate knowledge base about these endemic plants, about the habitats or the spatial ecosystem. no specific management focus with respect to these special ecosystems, with respect to these special habitats, or with respect to these endemic species, and poor appreciation of values. This is again, I consider weakness. Similarly, if we see the opportunity part, then maintaining unique genes for posterity, this is one opportunity available with us. The potential can be harnessed, for example, the nature tourism. Effective use for economic upliftment is possibility is there using all these unique elements. And again, the threats associated are climate change impacts, increasing invasion of alien species, and human-induced perturbations, which are affecting the unique elements of Indian Himalayan region. So similarly, the indigenous knowledge system, which is prevailing in Indian Himalayan region, with the indigenous communities, it has its own strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and the strong conservation.
Rawan, will be grateful
this is,
can wrap it up in 1 minute, Dr. Rawan.
Yes, basically it is finished, sir. Basically, I would just indicating that these are the possibilities for these are the indicators of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats across different sectors of biodiversity. So this is what I wanted to convey through this presentation. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your insight. Sorry to keep you short, but I think that was the demand. We are running out of time. So I now move to my next speaker of the session, Dr. Sunita Chaudhary. She is currently working as Ecosystem Services Specialist at ECMOD, and she is responsible for research, policy inputs, capacity building, and advocacy of evidence-based policy for sustainable development in Hindu Kush Himalayas. So I invite you, the floor is all yours, Dr. Sunita, please go ahead.
So Dr. Sunita, you have 8 minutes. I think you are muted.
Yes, sorry. So yeah, I just put it on mute.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so namaste everyone. I'm Sunita Chaudhary, as already mentioned. I'm working as Ecosystem Services Specialist at ECMOD and also candidate to Vice Chair of World Commission on Protected Areas for 2020 to 2025. So today, within 8 minutes, I'll try to give a very brief overview of biodiversity status, threats and challenges, and some of the progress we have made in the region. So before starting, I'll just would like to thank the organizing committee for the invitation. And also I'd like to acknowledge ECMOD and its core donors, and also our DG for giving the permission to present on this very important event. And I would like to acknowledge Dr. Eklavya Sharma and Dr. Nakul Chetri, whose work are also reflected in the presentation today. So I'll just start with a very basic overview of the region. So the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, for those who do not know, so the Hindu Kush Himalaya region is really a region covering all the whole countries of Bhutan and Nepal, and also the Himalayan parts of other 6 countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, China, Myanmar, and Pakistan. So if you can see the gray, the dark region in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, and the very light shadow is its river basin, because the region has 10 important rivers originating from the region, and the river basin can be seen in the light shaded area. The region is really very important in terms of biodiversity and other terms of food and also other reason. So the region has major folk biodiversity global hotspots. It is the largest reserve of ice outside the polar region. That's why the region is often known as the third water tower of the Asia or polar region, a third pole of the beside the polar region. So it is, as Ozeli said, it is the source of the 10 major source of the Asia rivers, and it has very diverse cultures, language, religions, and traditional system. So just for instance, the region has more than like almost 100 living languages and different traditions, values, and cultures, which really shape the culture, the traditions, and the living systems of the mountain people. At the same time, the region is really rich in terms of protected areas. For instance, we have like 330 important bird and biodiversity areas, and it has more than 60 global ecoregions. So in terms of the dependency, like at the regional scales in the HKH region, around 240 million people are directly dependent in the HKH region for the lives and the livelihoods directly from the biodiversity. And if we see beyond the region, around like 1.9 billion people depend on the HKS for water, food, energy, and various other regulating services. And if we see at the global scale, around more than 35% of the world population directly and indirectly benefits from the different resources, ecosystems, goods, and services from the region. So with this, what we want to argue that whatever happens in this important mountain ecosystem directly and indirectly affects the 1/4 of the other population of the world. So that's why it is regarded as the pulse of the planet. So in terms of species diversity, because we are focusing on ecosystem and diversity, I wanted to reflect that the region has more than 81,000 floral biodiversity, and it has also like more than 15,000 faunal diversity. And if we see in terms of flagship species and the key mammal diversity, like lower Bengal tiger or rhinoceros, like the region has more than 33 key mammal species, which really are on the food chain and balance the ecosystems and provide different kind of services to the people and both nature. But at the same time, the region is highly fragile and very susceptible to the changes. And these changes are often multidimensional and very entangled. The environmental, social, and economic issues are very linked with each other, with impacts on both nature, different kind of ecosystems, and also biodiversity. But among them, one of the major threat is climate change, and it has already been published by HIMAP in 2019, saying that even 1.5 degree is really, really too hot for the region. And that's why it can be amplified based on the very diverse elevations according to the across the region. So it has impact on both ecosystem and diverse like people. So we can see that the Baker and mostly who did research for the over 80 years, they really see that the tree line across the cryosphere region is shifting. So when they had a look at 80 years, about 1 meter of the change in the vegetation across the region was observed. Similarly, like the glaciers are retreating very fast, and we are experiencing a lot of the globs and other disasters, which is becoming very prominent day by day and year by the year. So within this 8 minutes, there are so many initiatives, achievements, and progress made in the region. But I want to highlight about the transboundary landscape, which is one of the flagship program of the IUCN-CEM. So the transboundary landscape program really focuses on which really aims to like have an improved conservation and management of natural resources and enhance livelihoods of the mountain people, especially the vulnerable, through nature-based solution for better social but also ecological resilience. The major components of this program is really focused on innovative livelihood options, ecosystem management, like protected areas, corridors, and connectivity, regional cooperation, better governance, and long-term research and monitoring. This program really focuses on regional cooperation for sustainable development among the regional member countries, and not only to address the prominent shared challenges, but also to manage the socio-ecological system across the boundaries for achieving the sustainable development goals. So here, if you can see the slides, there are 4 landscape operation at the moment. So one you can see on the top is Kailas Sacred Landscapes, which really is unique for its cultural values with the Mount Kailas and unique biodiversity and its unique inaccessibility. So similarly, the Hindu Kush Himalaya, the Hindu Kush Karakoram landscape is a high altitude, high alpine arid region and spread in 3 countries, but also covers a part of Kazakhstan, and it is a high alpine area with many endangered species. Similarly, Kanchenjunga landscape is really unique for the corridors and connectivity and protected areas. And High Life, which is down in the Myanmar, China, and India, is really unique in terms of the biodiversity hotspots and endism. So these are the flagship species, the flagship programs of the IUCN, and if they really focus on the grounded issues and trying to make the people's livelihood better through different innovative solutions. So therefore, the Kailas Sacred Landscape was awarded award in 2017 for its uniqueness and also innovation and trying to build the socio-ecological resilience for the both people and nature.
Yes, Dr. Sunita, you have 1 minute to wrap up.
Yeah, so other one is the region is also doing good in terms of protected areas. So if we see from 1910, we really have progressed a lot. And as of now, in early 2020, we have like 545 protected areas. And if we focus on the Convention on Biological Diversity Assessment, really all the countries are doing well. But like Bhutan, it has really exceeded its Aichi target 11 with 55.39% of protected areas, and Nepal 23.39% of protected areas. So all of the countries are doing good, with China and India in good progress, but we really need to progress a lot because there are so many challenges. And for this, we really want to focus both on science policy, practice, but also the advocacy. So I think that International Mountain Biodiversity Day is a good platform that we not only create awareness, but we also are together creating networks coming together to make a difference for both mountain people and nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sunita. It was a very interesting and informative presentation. And while you highlight the being achieved by Bhutan, I now invite our next speaker from Bhutan, Dr. Lungten Norbu, who is an expert in conservation. He is representing Royal Society for Protection of Nature on this forum. The forum is all yours, Dr. Lungten. Please unmute yourself. It's down there, presentation IUCN, yeah, this one.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Lungten Norbu. I work for this small NGO called Royal Society for Protection for Nature. Before I joined this NGO, I worked for Minister of Agriculture and the Forest in Bhutan for almost 34 years. So I had opportunity of working. Basically, I'm a forester. As a forester, researcher, research manager, and more of an expert in the latter part of my career. Today's presentation, mine, is more of an overview. So you won't see a lot of statistics which earlier presentation have done. Mine will be more of a generic of mountain ecosystem and biodiversity in Bhutan. First, the values, threats, opportunities, what is there. Then briefly, I'll tell how, where we're working on the, as RSPN, where we're focusing. Our NGO is more
of 5
of
minutes.
But 5 minutes, okay.
Norma, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So, as you know, Bhutan, we have a lot of forest. 71% of land is under forest, and then 51% of forest is under protected area. Then, if you look on this map, you will see that broadly 3 florestic zone, which is in the down in the lower, in the southern belt is more broadly forest. Then in the middle is temperate, and up is alpine with high mountains. And Bhutan, our forest is mainly managed under this protected areas. As I said, 51% of the forest is managed under protected areas. Broadly, if you see the value of mountain ecosystem, like we have diverse resources that provide habitat for plants, animals, birds, and insects. They have, these provide also the huge potential to sustain industry, hydropower, tourism, and livelihood. Forest, agriculture, and livestock are the dominant sector that provide livelihood income to 65% of the rural populations. Other side, we have glaciers, lakes, marshes, springs, which are big resources for agriculture and hydro production. The other sector which is becoming important is the tourism. Then the threat, as elsewhere, the threat is mainly man-made, and the recent, not very recent, 2017, when we're preparing for RED+, we had done some deforestation and degradation study. For that, the main drivers for, especially for deforestation, is giving this state forest for various development purposes. The second comes hydro projects, roads, food, agriculture, mines, and quarry and power lines. In terms of forest degradation, the timber harvesting, that is mainly whether in the forest or in the private forest, is the timber harvesting. Then the other contributor is firewood, forest road, sorry, is forever. And third is livestock, grazing freely in the forest. This is just ecosystem requiring attention. For tropical forests along the foothills and lowlands are prone to agriculture expansion and settlement. So then other one is temperate forests in the inner valleys. These valleys have huge settlement which is expanding. So there's a threat. Then other one is riverine and riparian ecosystem within this watershed. This is where a lot of these hydropowers are being built. So there's a lot of pressure on this riverine and riparian forest. The other one is on high altitude wetland ecosystem, which is mainly above the 3000, where there's a lot of, in the alpine region, where there's a beautiful landscape, where tourism and those industries are growing. So it is putting a lot of pressure on this high altitude wetland ecosystem. The other one is a high mountain up in the northern part and the ecosystem. This is mainly, it comes from the climate change impact. Although up there is not many people. Now coming to the RSPN focus and approach, we are working outside the protected areas because in the protected area, it is done mainly by Department Forest and other services. So our focus is mainly outside the protected area in the species conservation, which have high values and are vulnerable or endangered. The two species we are working is on a black-necked crane in the high altitude wetland ecosystem. Then other one is white-bellied heron, low altitude riverine and riparian forest ecosystem. And both of these are vulnerable, and the second one is critically endangered bird. The approach we are taking is, we're taking a landscape approach where which bundle it them
Norbu, you have 1 minute to wrap up.
Okay, but then we have balancing. The other one is because the people there depend on ecosystem services of that. So we have to balance conservation and development. Other one is, since communities are highly dependent, we have to do this community engagement in conservation. Then on the constraints and opportunities, there's a lack of data on different ecosystems and their status, a lack of local climate data and risk analysis, and there's a opportunity to do assessment, valuation of different ecosystems, and networking and information sharing. Thank you, Tashidele.
Thank you so much, Dr. Linton. This indeed provided us a lot of insights about Bhutan and what initiatives RSPN has been taking. RSPN has been our great supporter and collaborator for previous time also. So with this, without taking much time, I invite next speaker of this forum, Professor Rakesh Mekhuri, who has contributed a lot on mountain ecosystem studies, and he was former scientist with G.V. Pant National Institute, and now he is professor and head Department of Environmental Sciences, HNB Garhwal, and he was also Pradhan Mantri Vishishta Vaigyanik Awardee. So without taking much more time, I invite him. Sir, the floor is all yours. Please share your views. Sir, please unmute yourself. Sir, you need to unmute yourself. We are not able to hear you.
Yeah. Good evening to all. I am very thankful to organizers IUCN Commission on Ecosystem Management and FAO for providing the opportunity to participate in this webinar. And the topic was assigned to me, that is Western Himalayas, enhancing disaster risk resulting in socio-economic vulnerability. The Western Himalaya is prone to catastrophic disasters, both natural and man-made, from time immemorial. The whole region is most fragile and vulnerable to disasters, mainly caused due to the geophysical and meteorological factors. Along with these natural causes, to some extent, human-induced activities are also responsible for accelerating the intensity and severity of disaster. And as a result, The region is highly susceptible to natural hazards such as flash floods, landslide, cloud bursts, forest fire, and large magnitude of the earthquakes. The frequency of natural disaster has reportedly increased considerably during the past 3 decades. The vulnerability of the region is aggravated by indiscriminate and short-sighted economic development, environmental degradation, and natural resource depletion, and that has increased the factors leading to the fragility of the ecosystem, making it more susceptible to climate-related disasters, and that cause huge loss to human life and damage to property, economy, and largely affect the social fabric of the society. Now I will give you the recent example of that recent disaster of Uttarakhand in 2013, and that bears the testimony this, where in a large part of the state was affected by floods due to widespread and excessive rain in the upper reaches of the Himalayas, and that was accompanied with occurrence of landslide and glacial lake outburst flood. The extreme events that killed thousands of people and caused extensive damage to the infrastructure and property and have direct negative impact and on the social entities such as livelihood-related activities, health, education, infrastructure, and natural resources, and that stimulated the inequalities and increases the socio-economic vulnerabilities among the people and communities living in the region. We also worked on this aspect a little bit on after the post-disaster, that the local people, they face the challenges due to food insecurity, poverty, and insecurity regarding the future, as the economy of the region was totally tourism dependent. And we found that the vulnerability, and we observed the vulnerability that is related to livelihood related impact. We observed where the people, they were depending on the pilgrimage tourism, agriculture, livestock, and forest resources. Then there was another area that is health related impact. The number of patients after this disaster that increased, that were in the psychological trauma, depression, hypertension, and other diseases. Their education related impact, that education system that weakened, less enrollment and dropout, increased inaccessibility of primary and secondary school, and infrastructure related impact, that road, motors, and bridle bridge, schools, health center that destroyed and damaged. And on top of that, the women vulnerability that increases due to the damage of the rural landscape and many other activities. So in my opinion, now there is a need to adopt the socio-ecological system approach, which attempt to promote a culture of preparedness and prevention by promoting and supporting the mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in the region. Therefore, it is the village community that has to respond immediately to any disaster, and hence a culture of preparedness need to be developed in the mind of every rural villagers and citizen. This will help to build the resilience of communities to prepare for, respond to, and cope up with the effect of future disaster. And now again, there is a need, since we are working in the mountainous region where we have the traditional communities, ethnic groups across the Indian Himalayan region, and they have their traditional knowledge. They have their indigenous local knowledge. And in that situation, we have to document or utilize the local traditional knowledge for preparedness and the recovery measures. And at the same time, we have to strengthen the capacities of the local institutions and provide valuable inputs to district, state, and national disaster management authorities, as well as district disaster management center and National Institute of Disaster Management to deliver and sustain a scaled up program in disaster risk reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for keeping the time and also sharing very important insights on Himalayan tsunami. And with this, we come to the last speaker. We have Professor Brajesh Tiwari, who has his extensive work experience on jhum cultivation and northeast Himalayas, and his some insights have been also accepted by Niti Aayog. So I welcome him and I request him to share his perspectives on the topic.
Hello.
Dr.
Good
Tiwari,
evening.
5 minutes.
My slide is shared.
Not yet, sir. Your slide
Not
is
yet.
not shared.
You have to say share screen. Yeah, you have to press.
Yeah, I did it.
Then you have to say, I think sometimes you have to do twice. You have to say share after you press your file. You press the presentation and then share screen. Then you have to go and do the slideshow.
Is it done?
Yeah. Yeah, now you have to go to slideshow. Yeah, you are right. You're okay now.
Is it fine now?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Please go ahead.
okay. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts and views. The topic allotted to me is enhancing pressure on forest ecosystems of Eastern Himalayas, threats and concerns. In fact, the humans and forests, they coexisted for more than 4 million years, and the distortion in their interaction took place only at about 1,000 years back. So for humans have been a part of the ecosystem, forest ecosystem, and the anthropogenic pressures were minimal. Now, what is happening is that the man has come out of the forest ecosystem, and the anthropogenic pressures have started. Today, we shall briefly discuss the forest ecosystems of Eastern Himalayas and how they are coming under threat and what can be done for their mitigation and improvement. Some of what I wanted to discuss has been already discussed by Mr. Rawal, Madam Chaudhary. So I will skip some of those points. As we see that Eastern Himalayas, it extends about 2,415 kilometers starting from Nepal till northwest Yunnan, and it covers an area of 524,190 square kilometers. It includes Bhutan, Sikkim, Northeast India, Darjeeling Hills, Southeast Tibet, Northern Myanmar. The three global biodiversity hotspots, that is Himalayas, Indo-Burma, and mountains of Southwest, are included in this region. The altitudinal range of Eastern Himalaya varies from 300 meters to 8,000 meters. The region has rich cultural diversity and is inhabited by tribals and traditional societies. Briefly, within this time span allotted to me, we have to understand that because of the altitudinal gradients, almost all types of forests are found in this region. There are tropical forests of various kinds, subtropical forests. They are distributed between 1,000 to 2,000 meters, temperate forests, subalpine forests, and alpine meadows and scrubs. The region is very rich in biodiversity. So just for example, we can state here that about 10,000 plant species, out of which 30% are endemic. Birds, about 977, species, mammals 300 species, freshwater fishes 269, reptiles 176, again 30% endemic, amphibians 105, and this region also is a habitat for some of the flag species like tigers, rhinos, elephants, and snow leopard. Coming to the point, the pressures. The main pressure on these forest ecosystems of the region is hunting, poaching, and their commercial trade. It is not talked so much in the government parlance, but there are a number of publications coming out on this topic, particularly from Arunachal and some other northeastern states. And they record, even some of our publications, we have reported that some of the economically well-off people in the high mountains of Arunachal, they are those who are engaged in hunting and poaching. The illegal logging is very rampant. Forest fire is, if you see the atlas of forest fire, you will find that the almost whole of the hill regions, they are red. About 8,000 fire alerts were reported between December 19 to December 20 in Meghalaya alone, which is about 22,000 square kilometers and only. Within the plantations, within the forest, even recorded forests, there are plantations of tree, tea, rubber, erica nut, and oil palm. The Mizoram state, very small state, about 20,000 square kilometers. Recently, they have raised about 28,000 hectares of oil palm. The encroachment and settlements are very common in this region. Jhum is one of the drivers for land use change from forest to agriculture, although sometimes the agriculture is also converted into forest, but this is also affecting the forest biodiversity and forest area. Fuel wood, NTFP and MP collection as unsustainable grazing is rampant. Mining of coal, limestone, and some other minor minerals is taking place in many places, including sandstone, including some of the other such minerals. Diversion of forest for infrastructure is taking place in many places, particularly in the border areas of the different international borders. Insurgency is also very common in this region, not talked so much in such conferences, but many of the biodiverse forests, natural forests, they are also home for the insurgents. So they exploit the resource, not only that they exploit the resources, but the area is out of governance because the government departments, they hardly visit such places. So the threats and concerns, as it is evident, first thing happens is the loss of biodiversity. The biodiversity is lost, which is known, and biodiversity is also lost, which is not known, not yet explored. Diminished ecosystem services, drying of rivers and other water bodies, impaired livelihood of forest-dependent people, land degradation, reduced primary productivity, the land use change from forest to scrub and grassland. Anybody who has visited Cherrapunji, you can see that what is happening, the forests are sinking and the grasslands and scrublands are increasing. Increase in poverty because of the land degradation, because of the fertility loss, and because of the resource loss, forest resource loss, the poverty is increasing, and that is resulting into migration of the people in cities. This one of the districts, that is West Khasi Hills of Meghalaya, which is also considered to be richest in forest cover, but that is the place where maximum migration has taken place from where? and maximum illegal logging is also taking place. Suggested solutions. It is important that in this region there are the ecosystems are explored and they are listed in the red listing is started and prioritization of action is taken place. Then the second important thing is that enhancing management through better governance and better enforcement of laws, because many of these drivers, they are related to poor governance. Poverty reduction is very important. Unless the poverty reduction and better and conservation of forest both cannot go hand in hand, because we cannot ask poor people to stop collection of fuel wood, collection of medicinal plants, MTFPs, and other such materials, or even grazing, if there is poverty in that region. Then the cadastral survey. This is another important issue, because the boundaries of forest and agriculture and other land uses are not marked, and many places even the ownership is not marked. So therefore, and in large part of this region there is no cadastral survey. So unless that is done, the management, proper management is not possible. Land use planning. Most of this region has no land use plan, and there is a unrestricted, there is no restriction on the change in land use. Forest can be converted to agriculture, agriculture is converted into forest, or even the settlements can encroach on agricultural lands or on forest land. So this type of land use change which takes place, it results into loss of the resources and particularly forest. Creating awareness about forest ecosystem services. My experience is that unless until the local people, they are made aware about the ecosystem services, particularly water, forest, soil conservation, and other such ecosystem services, the making them engaged in the forest conservation or management is difficult, because only if the forests are looked as like source of timber, then the conservation of the forest will be difficult. So these are some of the thoughts which I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for giving insights on all the important topics and areas that we requested from you, and it provides a lot of over Eastern Himalayas without taking much time. Now, very quickly, because we are already late with the time, so I'll quickly invite Dr. Alak Saxena, who is faculty at North Arizona University and has also been involved with Yale Himalaya Initiative. So I'll request him, Dr. Alak, to please take your come online, and please, I have three important questions, because we were not requesting any important presentation from you. The key idea of having you with us was to share your experiences about what are the key priority areas in Hindu-Kush Himalayas that you think need urgent ecosystem health assessments. The question. The second is on what are the key data gaps? You have already heard a lot of experts, but according to you, what do you think are the key data gaps for South Asian mountains? And where do you see collaborations and knowledge partners? You have already contributed a lot, I could see on Jamboard. So I would like to hear briefly from you. We have been waiting for long, and thank you so much for being with us very early in the morning.
I will be very brief. I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Dayani, and the organizers for including me. It's such an honor to be a part of this group, and I actually have learned a lot. And I'm very happy to see many of the comments that I would have made already being mentioned by some of our senior colleagues here. So I was very happy to see Dr. Makhuri, Dr. Rao, Dr. Saksena's presentation, Dr. Tiwari's presentation, Dr. Chaudhary. They've done a tremendous job, and I feel like, you know, I'm one of those who's kind of chiming in when the party is already over. So I'll have to be careful, but I do think that there are a few things that I can contribute. One is, I think, from the persist from Dr. Sato, if I'm not Chloe Sato's presentation about assessing the ecosystems. I do think that there is a strong need for deep histories to be included. I think it was Dr. Tiwari or Dr. McCree who were saying that we've been part of this system. You know, these landscapes are not completely ecological and pure, pristine. These systems have been included with human interventions across the history, and I would strongly encourage that we include those deep histories, not just ecological histories, which can go further down, but also human histories. That's one. I want to pitch in one thing which I really liked about FAO presentation was that they're thinking about creating partnerships. I think partnership is a key to mountain sustainability, and I think the greater the partnerships across local and regional, and for that national, international partnerships is really important. So that was highlighted, and I would strongly encourage that we move there. One thing I think that was not was mentioned, and I think, but I would like to emphasize is the role of private sector. I think role of private sector, if you think about it, where is the demand coming from? The mountain, I personally feel that the mountains are providing to the demands of the world, or the plains, if I may use that way. So while local communities may be engaged in their own sustenance and extraction, majority of the pressure is coming from outside. And that's often connected to economies. And so I think it's very important to recognize private sector as a key player in these kind of assessments and solutions. And that's what I wanted to highlight. This goes back to kind of what are the key gaps. I think we are doing a great job now trying to assess. I think there is no need for me to argue that we need more assessment. I think that's being done. It should be done even more. But I would like to highlight that we should actually create a compendium of solutions. And this is particularly from IUCN's perspective of nature-based solutions. Now think about it. We've got the glacier stupas that have been run by Mr. Sonam Wangchuk in Ladakh. We've got the tree root bridges that are showing up in Meghalaya. We've got tremendous amount of solutions that local communities have had through the traditional ecological knowledge. And it would be a missed opportunity to recognize the knowledge that these communities have, and to be able to preserve that knowledge while we are recognizing IUCN's approach for conservation. I think there are solutions, and I would argue that this will empower indigenous communities of their own knowledge, and it will help highlight that even with such tremendous pressure, that communities have been able to survive and sustain alongside of many of these species. I totally recognize that degradation is happening, but at the same time, I also want to just highlight that species have survived along human side. So I think that's something important from my side. I think Dr. Tiwari very kind of succinctly mentioned, we must recognize cross-border issues. In many scientific panels, it's a little hard to discuss these, but politics and poor governance and lack of clarity often creates disputes and leads to challenges in conservation. So I think that's where Dr. Sonali Chaudhary was arguing for transboundary issues. I think we should be recognizing and probably doing some more work. We have done some work on transboundary flood resilience across the Gandaki River Basin. So I really appreciated Dr. McCree's presentation that we must recognize that the degradation of mountain systems has a direct implication on the plains survivability. And I think that needs to be, we highlight this in terms of the value, right? Billions of rupees is being directly contributed to ecosystem services. I think that's great, but we should clearly link, if you degrade mountains, your plains are not going to survive, period, right? One of the things that is very clearly recognized is how quickly flash floods and ecosystem resilience of mountains affects the low-lying communities. And I think that needs to be highlighted at a national or international priority. And gosh, so many things to say. I think I would like to pitch in for Northern Arizona University. We are sitting here at 7,000 feet or 2,100 meters for people who use metrics. We are in the middle of the world's largest pinyon pine stand. We are dealing with the same issues that Himalayan institutions are dealing in terms of serving indigenous populations who are within United States, still having issues of food security, are incredibly vulnerable to climate change, and we are facing forest fires like nothing. So we are very eager and interested in engaging with other universities that are doing the same work. And we would like to even include and invite scientists who have been working on these issues. We are particularly starting a forest in the mountain environments kind of program. And so I hope that I'll get a chance to meet with some of you and discuss some larger solutions. So in the interest of time, I'll stop here. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Alark, for filling the gaps and summing up on all those issues and topics that previous speakers have not covered. So we really thank your time and your insights. And now I move to one of the last speakers of this session, Dr. Anwar Hussain, who will be representing Bangladesh on this forum. Dr. Anwar, you have very less time with you, but nevertheless, we would like to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shalini, for your and also organizer to give me the opportunity in this valuable program. I am from Bangladesh. So you know the 3 districts of Bangladesh, Chittagong Hill Tracts, this is a mountain area, 10% of the total land area this area, and 40% of the country's forest cover is situated here. And this area is one of the diverse ecosystem services provider for Bangladesh. So this area, from the experience by some research experience from this area, I just suggested you 3 questions, 3 priority areas for the ecosystem services health assessment in South Asia especially. We need to identify the role of the ecosystem services firstly for the key areas, social development and community well-being. Secondly, local communities, survival and use of ecosystem services. Thirdly, cultural values and traditional knowledge of the indigenous communities, and maintain ecological diversity, balance between livelihoods, demands and benefits of local communities from the ecosystem services. And country also give the concern to conflict and wrong action towards ecosystem, climate change, negative impacts. And finally, government regulation rules to use and preserve ecosystem services and in this area. The key data gap for ecosystem service health assessment, the inventory, we need the inventory of ecosystem services, the identify the portion of direct and indirect beneficiaries from ecosystem services and ecosystem services contribution in economy, livelihood strategies, and as well as sustainable development. And finally, we need some prediction for ecosystem inventory for future survival. And finally, for some suggested initiative for the collaboration and partners, knowledge partners, we need to include the local communities in terms of local communities participation in terms of decision making and the preservation activities. We need transfer the indigenous community knowledge and practices. Several speakers already mentioned this one. We need the environmental governance, ensure the environmental governance and integration of the stakeholders, including the researchers, also these initiatives, and enhancing interdisciplinary knowledge and understanding among the stakeholders. We need transboundary cooperation among the South Asian countries, and finally, we need the international collaboration. I think this platform is one of the best initiative for us. So thank you. I think I not take huge time. Thanks to all of you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anwar. This was a pleasure to have you, and maybe we'll further write to you for more insights. Last speaker of this session is Dr. Pankaj Tiwari. Pankaj ji, can we have you here to share your views with reference to community-based organizations and non-governmental organizations and their role in ecosystem health assessment for Himalayas?
Yeah, good evening to all of you. Thanks to the organizers. Although everything has been told by the people, but I would just like to share a few of the insight from the ground level, because when we talk about the transboundary linkages and all things, already I was involved in the Kailash Sacred Landscape program, but I think the unit is the village. If we are able to create a village, a self-sustained model, then I think all the things can be resolved. So there we start. And because I represent one of the organization, this NGO that is working in diverse sector of health, environment, and livelihoods in the mountains. So I think one of the biggest gap, if I feel right now, is that still we are not tapping the indigenous traditional knowledge that is with the people, and that we need to basically cover that, and how it can be basically supplemented by the research, action research, that is the need. So at least we can create a model where we are having the indigenous traditional knowledge, as well as we are having a sort of scientific evidence for that. So that is one of the gap I feel there is still in whole our Himalayan region, that is still is exist. So that need to be addressed. One. Secondly, I think that the problem is that the aspiration of the people have changed in the mountains due to the improved communication, and that's why the migration is one of the biggest issue. So how much we are going to do the research, although I am from the same field of research, I have done my PhD in environment science, but working with the community for last 20 years, I believe that if we are not able to address the issues of the community at the ground level, so we can, nothing can be resolved. So how we are able to create a model where we can synergize the community with our natural resources or with the biodiversity, that is the need of the time. Otherwise we will be going continuously the research, but the ultimate impact is that if people are not able to understand, they understand, but we are not able to create a lot of what we can say the livelihoods for them, the facilities for example in Uttarakhand, the poverty is not a big issue among the people, but we are facing the issues of the hardships. So when we need the services, the infrastructure, the livelihood options, the health, then education, so it is very important that if we want to address all these issues, especially the gaps, as well as what could be the possible solution for that, so I think we have to integrate with the biodiversity, the especially the health and education part. One. Secondly, when we talk about the biodiversity, many times we focus on the forest in general. When we talk about the biodiversity, we talk about the forest, but I am looking in the areas, in most of the areas, that agro biodiversity are also depleting too much. People are just introducing for the high value crops, and so in that case we are losing our traditional crops. Those have the clear impact, those are resilient to the climate change and all those things. So we have to look after all these issues. So this is also one of the cause of the diversity loss. So I think 3 points, and then one is more important point, that is the gap is still the water quality and its management. There we need a lot of research, because right from water conservation management, we need the water quality, one of the question that is arising in the mountains. And so these are some of the issues that I feel we have to address, right? That how it there could be the synergy between the science, the policy, and the practice. It is a huge gap. The science is there, research is going on there, but it is not coming at the ground level. Similarly, the ground based learnings are not going for the scientific research. So there we need a synergy. And I think once we get this synergy, and that could start from a cluster of villages, then it could goes to the further to the what we can say the state, then transboundary level. I think in that way, if you are able to so
Okay,
again
thank you,
I'm
Dr. Pankaj.
sharing out here that we should again focus that there is need a synergy between the communities, and from ground level to the upper level. So bottom up approach as well as top bottom approach is required if you want to resolve all these issues out there. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Pankaj. Yeah, we are done with this entire panel discussion and speakers, and now we are ready for the poll. Based on our important insights all speakers have given, we have developed a poll, and it will be shared on the screen so that all the panelists can actually vote to the areas and the perspectives that you strongly agree to, so that it gives us a comprehensive and a mutual understanding on these priority areas that we can further take up. And while this poll comes on your screen, Dr. Rajiv Chaturvedi, Chair for Forest Specialist Group of IUCN-CEM, he will share and his thoughts and also sum up with this entire discussion. Rajiv.
Thank you, Shalini. So yeah, we have been pressed with the time. So as you work on the poll, I think I will just try to say a few words about what people have spoken so far in this forum, and maybe some of my own ideas. I was listening to Dr. Alak Saxena, and his thoughts were quite impressive. And he was talking about the kind of hardship that the mountain communities are facing, even in the current with the observed climate change, etc. But I'm really worried about the future projections. Model after model, like I work quite often with the climate models and try to apply them for their forest ecosystems. So model after models, even from CMIP 3 models, CMIP 5 models, the latest generation of climate models, CMIP 6 models. So I have probably looked at hundreds of models. In all of these models, one thing that I find common is that in the Himalayas, in the Himalayan Hindu Kush, and in that region, the temperature, the kind of temperature rise that is being projected is much more severe than what the region has so far witnessed. The future, probably in 30, 40, 50 years, is going to be completely different from anything that has been witnessed by this very fragile region. So what I believe that it is not only a biodiversity hotspot, it has been well established to be a biodiversity hotspot, Himalayas and entire this Hindu Kush, Himalayas, Karakoram region as all these areas, but it is also a climate change hotspot, not only in India, but even at the global level, because there is a very good confidence and very good agreement among different modeling groups and models, especially in terms of the future projections. So that is one thing I would like to highlight, and that must be considered into the red listing of the ecosystem. That aspect has to be considered. Yeah, and also we do have many data gaps, limitations, etc. I think many of the speakers have spoken about a range of data limitations. Being a climate, like being a scientist who's working on the interface of climate change, I do find that in terms of observed climate data, it is a limitation. For a very large area, we don't have any data. Even if the data is there, that is there for a very short period of time, and then some natural disaster comes in, avalanche comes in, something, then again the station doesn't work. So you have very intermittent data. So the data on the observed climate is a problem in the area, and probably I think I agree with Dr. Shato's presentation that maybe we will have to look at the satellite data in terms of filling the data gaps, etc. So that's all I think I have to say at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv. And as we are now at the end of the poll, and we have got some votes now, I will end this poll, and I will share the results on the screen that you all can see. Deepu, I hope I can end this poll now. Or you want me to take it for one more minute? Okay, I'll wait for with this. We are almost at the end of this session, and this interesting sharing of information was there. For the concluding remarks, I invite Deputy Chair, IUCN Commission on Ecosystem, Dr. Madhav Karki, to share the concluding remarks with all of us. Sir, please.
So thank you, Dr. Shalini. It is very difficult to conclude very rich presentation in 3 to 4 minutes. So I can say that the presentation which the panelists have made have provided us a lot of ideas, new approaches, new tools, new insights to better understand the dynamics of mountain change in mountains of the South Asia. especially the Himalayas. I think these tools and these fresh ideas can help us to better assess, better value, and better manage our mountains for more resilient ecosystems and more resilient communities. Climate change rightly has been identified as the most important drivers of biodiversity change in the mountains. You all know that the world commemorated the fifth anniversary of Paris Agreement recently. The world has warmed up by 1 degree Celsius. The mountains have warmed up at least by 1.5 degrees Celsius, and higher altitudes are facing much more warming. This means that mountain biodiversity will be facing more threats, and the communities will be facing more extreme events, and I would say the ecosystem services supply would be at risk. So we have to find new ways for for protecting mountain biodiversity, from these changes. I think we have heard that especially the presentation from Dr. Chloe Sato and also from Sarah, that assessment of mountain ecosystem is very, very important. So regular assessments, classification of the ecosystem will allow us to avoid ecosystem collapse in the mountains, which are very important. As you all heard, that mountains are source of so many of our food systems. And you also heard from Sarah that 1 in 2 mountain people are facing the risk of food insecurity. And so this is a very, very important, I would say, the information. Of course, I heard a lot of solutions. I think we have, the good news is that we can do something about it. I mentioned transformative change. The organization with which I'm associated is doing an assessment, global assessment on transformative change. What I heard from you are some of the elements of this transformative change. I often say that business as usual is not an option. So we need to have different options. I heard deep history from Mr. Saxena, Mr. Dr. Tiwari. I think filling in the data gap, partnership, multi-stakeholder participation, role of private sector are some of the elements which I think we need to put together. Indigenous and local knowledge need to be acknowledged and recognized. In fact, some of the solution can be built on this rich knowledge systems, and more than knowledge system, there are also very good, I would say, well tested practices which can be also used as a building block. I think cross-border cooperation and transboundary collaboration, transboundary cooperation in biodiversity conservation. We have a lot of success stories. I think the tiger conservation is one cross-border examples, and the Kailas, and then the Kanchenjunga. These are the transboundary examples which was presented by ICIMOD colleagues. Finally, I would say that, so actually final, my remark would be to say huge thank you to all the panelists who really gave your valuable time to share information. I think these are very, very fresh information, which we really appreciate from IUCN and CEM point of view. And we, as all of you know, that CEM has and IUCN have just released global standard for nature-based solutions. These ideas, I am sure, we will be used to promote nature-based solution. And nature-based solutions are very, very important for the South Asian mountains to avert ecosystem collapse, to avert biodiversity loss and biodiversity. I would say the habitat loss, and finally we will also use this information to prepare better, I would say, solutions for providing to the governments and to our members, IUCN members, for conserving biodiversity for posterity. So thank you very much for all your inputs. Finally, I cannot close it without thanking Dr. Shalini Dhyani, who put all her hard work to get all of us together. And my special thanks to Mountain Partnership for so kindly joining hands with us. Without this collaboration, this type of event cannot be organized. I would also like to thank my RLE colleagues, Dr. Clove Sato, and along with that, David and other colleagues for their presentation. So thank you all. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to Dr. Shalini. And I would also like to thank Dr. Rajiv and other colleagues. There are many to be thanked. So, so with that, thank you and good evening.
Thank you so much, Madhav sir. And you have already given vote of thanks to, I'll not repeat. I'll thank you as our deputy chair and focal point to IUCN-CEM. And I thank our chair and Manuela, who has been really kind to extend all the technical support from IUCN-CEM to make this event a really successful one. We thought, and I'm now flashing the results of the poll before we all leave, so that you all can actually see on your screens that what kind of attendees have thought as a major priority areas for red listing of ecosystem health should be taken for Himalayas and Hindu Kush Himalayas. You all are able to see the poll results on your screens. So that means health of biodiversity in mountain area associated and cultural biodiversity, 82% of you agree. In the perspective of South Asia, which space requires more work, so people have voted more for joint actions on transboundary and global collaborations, key gaps in mountain health assessment. The major vote came for existing data to be aligned in order to identify the gap in key biodiversity that prioritizes for conservation. And then what is more important in South Asian mountains, so the major contribution and vote went to use of typologies to access red listing. Then the other question and the last question was which component of red listing of ecosystem can be most beneficial for South Asia. So the major vote went for to understand threats of climate change and the anthropogenic drivers while also improving livelihoods and well-being. So these are some of the wonderful polling results that you all gave to us. I am so thankful to everyone here, to all the attendees, to all the participants, despite of sitting to odd time hours. It is already night in India. I'm sure early morning somewhere and midnight somewhere. I thank you everyone once and again. And with this, I would like to say goodbye from India.
Dr. Shalini, a picture? Do we take a picture?
We have taken a lot of pictures, but yes, this final picture of these all participants who are still online, it is good to take. So the team has already taken a lot of pictures. Please switch on your cameras before we leave. Oindrila, Parush Vastav, Vivek sir has already left.
No, I am here. You have to activate my camera.
Thank you so much, sir, for staying so long with us.
Thank you, Dr. Sir.
My camera is, I think, blocked from your end, so you have to.
Is it? Please, Adipu, see what is the problem. Is there an issue with the camera?
No, it's fine now.
No. Is it fine? Yeah, we can see you.
Now we can see it.
Maikuri sir, can we have you on camera? He has left, I suppose. Dr. Sunita, can we have you on the camera? Dr. Oindrila. So we have more or less all the participants here. I'll quickly click a picture of all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for staying so long till the late evening.
So thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Good night. Good night.
Yeah. Thank you. Good night. Bye-bye. Goodbye. Bye.
Good night, Vivek ji. Dr. Saxena, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.